Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alistair Melrose. I'm a seed grower from Angus on the east coast of Scotland, and I'm also a Potato Council board member. We're very fortunate that we have a panel of international potato experts with us here from a wide and varied roles in the industry. And rather than me introduce all of them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to have a panel discussion, but Chantell is going to drive that discussion. So once the gentlemen have introduced themselves, we'll pass over to Chantell and we'll start the session. So if I can start with you, Frank.
Thank you, Alistair. My name is Frank Muir. I'm the President and CEO of the Idaho Potato Commission, with the organization that does all the marketing promotions for Idaho's famous potatoes. Idaho ships potatoes throughout the world in all different segments. And this year we harvested about 12 billion pounds of potatoes. So we're very, very proud of our spud.
Samah Al-Domyati from Domyata Group Egypt, Business Development Manager. Our company imported 32,000 tons last year of seeds, and we also import processing ware potatoes for the crisping market. Thank you.
I'm BP Singh, Director, Central Potato Research Institute based in India. We are responsible, our institute is responsible for all the R&D that is required for potato cultivation in the country. And I'm informed that India is producing over 40 million tons of potatoes from almost 2 million hectares.
I'm Terry Olsen. I'm a potato grower from New Zealand. I'm a past chair of Potatoes New Zealand, and I also played a role in helping to bring the World Potato Congress to New Zealand some 3 years ago.
My name's David Wilkinson. I'm Director of Agriculture for PepsiCo Europe.
Okay, Chantell.
Thank you. Right, well, I'm Chantell Ilbury. I'm from South Africa. I'm a strategist and a scenario planner, and I generally work with companies around the world or different organizations, actually, or even countries in terms of positioning themselves strategically going forward. So what we're going to try and attempt to do in this workshop is to run a few elements of a strategic conversation for the potato industry going forward. What is the future of the potato industry? Now, we've got a very limited period of time, and to have a conversation with so many people in the room will be far too much. So if you don't mind, if you could bear with me, I'm going to have the conversation with my panel, and we will have the debate and bring out a few issues and start the framework of what the scenarios could look like. And then if there is anything burning at the end and we've got a minute or two and you want to ask anything of the panel, please, that's perfect, but we can't do it with everyone. What I would like to just set the scene with then in terms of what we're going to look at. This morning I presented just a global outlook, and if we're looking at the potato industry going forward, one would want to understand what that global outlook might be looking like in the next 5 to 10 years. And because nobody can actually say with certainty that this is what that future is going to look like, we have to play it out into a set of scenarios. So the scenarios around the global environment going forward are really going to be based on whether we're going to be in one world, and then as an industry too, we can be looking at things across that one world and looking at different markets and looking at the nuances and who the players are and where the competitiveness in this one world type of scenario is going to be, versus are we in a more divided world? And a more divided world means a lot more fragmented. We're certainly going to get blocks forming. Access to those resources and access to markets is going to be very different. And then are we going into the growth scenario in the next couple of years, or are we still going to stay in the U, which is really the low growth scenario staying at the bottom? So we said this morning that there are 4 scenarios globally that the world can play in. The first one is new balls, please. It is a tennis term. when you want to change the game and you ask for new balls. But the growth scenario would be a new balls please scenario. We all know what happened after the long boom. We went into hard times. So in hard times scenario, a lot of stimulus packages started to come in, bailouts, but we've seen a lot of innovation, research and development. We've seen value propositions being questioned. We're seeing behavior, consumer behavior changing. From hard times, because China did get quite a lot of growth, we went into ultraviolet. The ultraviolet scenario is the two-speed scenario that the world's been in. So we actually probably moved from hard times into ultraviolet, and anybody who was still supplying commodities in particular to China came out of recession. So Africa, Australia, Germany still did well. All in the V, and then Europe still in the U, the US in the U, etc. So that two-speed has been at play, and it's been good positioning for some parts of the world and some countries in particular. And then, of course, there is a scenario that could play out. We are in an uncertain world that could be what we call the forked lightning. And forked lightning really means if there is a second financial crisis or a second crisis, global crisis, that second drop could be huge. And we'll see a world, as much as we'll see a world that looks very different in the growth scenario, because I think there are going to be real differences. We're going to move out of the industrial paradigm eventually in the growth scenario. But likewise, we're going to see a very different world in this forked lightning type of scenario with that second drop. So these are two outlying scenarios for the next 5 to 10 years. We give this a 10% probability and this a 20%. Our take, and when I say our take, myself and my partner that work together, we actually think the 40% probability is for hard times, that the world will be in hard times, and 30% that we're going to be in this ultraviolet, which is more an emerging market type of scenario. So both of them have opportunities. Both of them will present issues, challenges, and opportunities for your business, and certainly for the potato industry. So what I want to do with the panel in the next 30 minutes is to say, okay, having based that the environment, what are the scenarios for the potato industry? Now, how do you build scenarios? You've got to say, okay, well, we've got to use a little bit of a methodology, and we've got to say, if we're looking at 2012 and we're going to look at the scenarios to 2020, for example, in 2012, that cone of uncertainty gets bigger and bigger. So for the potato industry, we want to say, well, what are some of the certainties in the next 10 years that are going to play out? So one of the questions I'm going to ask the panel is, what are some of the certainties we see collectively for the industry itself globally? Obviously, there will be certainties and uncertainties in each country, but we want to just get a big picture. So what are some of the certainties that we see going forward? And then what are the uncertainties? And from those uncertainties, we're going to see in this session in 30 minutes, very bold, if we can develop a set of scenarios. In other words, develop the framework for the 4 scenarios for the potato industry. And if that can be a takeaway that you can then build those scenarios yourself and then ask your own questions across those scenarios, what does it mean for you as a player at a particular position in the industry? Okay, so everybody, you happy with that? And we'll start with the certainties. Do you want to give it a little bit of structure? Are there some things that we want to look through, some areas that you want to look through, or should we just go into what are the certainties going forward? I'm happy with certainties.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what do you think some of those certainties are?
I would just, first of all, say profit margins are going to continue to be thin across all parts of the chain. A lot of pressure on costs going up, and prices trying to push them up, but always a challenge.
Okay.
I think I'd come at it from the opposite end as well. I mean, I think there's, you should always put the consumer at the centre of things in your thinking, I feel, when you're looking as to what's going to happen in the future. And I think in the short term and maybe the medium term is that the consumer is going to demand values. And I think the whole pricing is going to be a very sensitive balance to get right, because consumers will look for value, they will demand certain things like quality and potatoes grown the right way, but there's going to be a real overrider on value.
Okay, so if I say consumers will look for value and the balance between?
Yeah, but I think it's going to be tipping to value rather than all of the other good stuff. They'll take the other good stuff as an absolute, it's got to happen, but they'll be really focusing on value.
Yeah. Okay. And if any of you disagree, then, you know, obviously say, I actually don't see that as the... So the consumer will look for value, the other stuff will be a given, and therefore the definition of value, what value in the consumer's eyes mean, and you link that with profit margins continuing to be thin.
I'll have new, improved, developed varieties.
Yeah. So there will be new, improved, developed varieties. Okay. Yeah.
The people with the capital invested are always going to be looking for the best outcome in terms of return on that capital. Like the business.
Very difficult to hear you.
The people that have capital invested are always going to be looking for the best outcome of that capital. You know, what is the best use of the capital?
Will look for best return.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Another certainty is that obviously water, land are limited resources. We're not going to find more water and we're not going to find more land. So it continues to put pressure on how we utilize those limited resources to get the most out of them. Obviously potatoes being a very water effective, efficient crop plays well for potatoes worldwide as compared to other grain crops or rice and so forth.
Okay. And the objective of putting some of these certainties down is to that very thing. If that's a certainty, what does it mean? Already there's a strategy. It's not a scenario. You don't actually have to scenario that out. It's now what does that mean for you and where can you find the opportunity in that and optimize? Okay, anything else as a certainty?
Competition from other food source.
There will be competition from other food sources.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Uncertainties, and we can come back to some certainties if you think of a certainty. What are some of the uncertainties?
Markets.
The what?
Markets, you know,
Markets.
the farmers are not, they are not sure, or they may not be sure whether they are going to get value out of their product if they start producing. And, you know, if there is a growth, and there is going to be growth in developing countries, and it is there, it's a positive growth. And naturally, if they commensurate with that, markets are not there. Industry is not there. Fresh consumption is, of course, limited. So there has to be markets commensurate with production, otherwise...
Okay, I'm just trying to think how do I word it as the uncertainty?
Uncertainty is related to markets, you know, markets for the produce potatoes, whether in terms of fresh or, you know, the processed ones.
So the uncertainty is the markets.
Yeah, markets.
Market demand.
Yeah.
If you've got potatoes in Pakistan and you export to Russia, and they don't want your potatoes because they're cheaper from Western Europe somewhere, then that market is uncertain.
Okay, so if I just put global markets in terms of...
Maybe the volatility of the markets.
Sorry?
Yeah,
The volatility of the markets.
yeah, that's a better word.
Maybe tied to that is trade agreements, whether or not there'll be more expansion of trade agreements between countries, or there'll be more restriction
Yeah.
based on phytosanitary rules or whatever. How open will trade agreements be across the world?
I think one of the uncertainties I see is legislation. So how can you grow the potatoes? What chemicals you can't use? How much you can't use? I think the actual growing of the crop and the legislation surrounding it will change.
In terms of the growing of the crop.
Yes.
So that's from a growing. Okay.
I would say global weather.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about, in the last 2 days, about GM varieties. We've heard presentations about how consumers are resistant to it, back to David's point about the importance of the consumer's perception. And we have scientists saying that GM is necessary in order for us to address environmental issues. And so where will that marriage be? Where will GM play a role in the future? Yeah, and it plays into the limited resources and all those other factors. But there's a huge education required to address that issue.
So if I just put the uncertainty, the role of GM...
Covers it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I have one more: supply of free varieties.
Supply
of free varieties.
Free
varieties. Free varieties.
Sorry.
It limits the development of some of the new varieties in some specific markets.
Anybody in the audience that does want to have, because now I think we can, it's small enough.
Emergence of new pests or diseases.
Yeah.
Chantell, there's another one I'd throw up there too, and that's the whole nutrition message. Right now, the nutrition message about potatoes is being defined by others. We haven't done a good job proactively as an industry worldwide of portraying the potato in its best nutrition light. So we have headlines on like Newsweek showing French fries and a child being the poster child of what's causing obesity in America, and I think the same images across the world. Yeah. We have to do a better job defining nutrition for potatoes, where it'll be defined for us.
Yeah.
Rather as a challenge than as an uncertainty.
Yeah, it's like exactly if we don't deal with it, it will be dealt with.
Yeah, it's more a challenge, it's an opportunity.
Yep.
You could almost phrase that as product associations, because we've talked potatoes as fresh potatoes, but fried crisps or fried chips have a very different context.
Yeah.
We just talk about potatoes. The consumer doesn't think of them as potatoes. It's, do they have crisps, do they have potatoes? Yeah. So that is product association. Whether it's a certainty or uncertainty.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think there's a little bit in here because there is something around the certainty that there is an increased focus on health. That's sort of the certainty.
Increased global population as positive. More middle class.
Increasing middle class, global.
Global population increase. Probably a positive for processed potatoes.
Yeah. I just want to come back to the uncertainty around because the uncertainty is that potato is seen as a healthy vegetable. That's the uncertainty. And then I do agree with you that could actually come off the list with enough work and communication, but it will, one's still not quite sure where it'll position. Yeah.
Those are looking at world oil prices, so it affects potash and commodities.
Yeah.
I would like to put up there that perhaps our willingness to invest in the young people as our future leaders, our future growers, our future scientists. I think there's at times a reluctance we have to invest in those people to bring out the right case scenarios.
So willingness to invest in
people,
young future generation. Yeah. In human resources in general, or 'cause
Yeah,
it's looking
well,
more
human
to
resources, yes.
Are you talking about sort of keeping farmers farming, or and securing future generations farming, or?
But no, right through the supply chain.
Okay.
Including research.
Absolutely.
You can't attract young people into potato science anymore.
You got it in one.
Wow. Right.
It's scary.
Okay, so skills is a major uncertainty across the, yeah.
I have a bit of an issue with the land one. I'm not making any more of it, but what's very important is the switch that you could see from potato crops to, say, biofuels. If all of a sudden it was supported by governments, by regulation, and there was less trading between countries, then it could be that individual nations will be forced to take land out of potato production and into some other crop.
Very true.
So land use.
Change of land use.
Change of land
from
use.
one crop to another based purely on economics or legal private
Government.
regulatory
Okay.
We had a similar discussion over lunch, and I think it's going to be, for me, that's all down to the market, because I can't see a government saying you can no longer grow potatoes, you're growing biofuel, but I can see a farmer saying I can make more money growing some biofuel crops. That's what I'm going to do. So for me, the uncertainty I had it written here is one of the uncertainties is who and where will I be growing potatoes? Definitely, because I see that changing.
So
I disagree with that. I don't think that's an uncertainty. I'm absolutely certain it's going to happen.
yeah.
Yeah, this is more so in context of developing countries where growth rates are much higher as compared to Europe and America. It's across 50 years. Growth rates potato in India is +5. Likewise, China and other countries where population growth rate is 1.8%. Naturally, we have to offset its effect as far as food availability is concerned. So, food security point of view, potato is going to be important for developing countries, including China and India and other developing countries. And therefore, potato cultivation is going to be a certainty in the years to come, at least in that part of the world. This is my way of thinking.
So we've got partly a certainty and partly an uncertainty in terms of...
Coming into what you're saying about segmentation into certain blocks, and blocks that have to produce, say, a cheap food source for an expanding population, and Western style block that has the wealth and the affluence just to eat potatoes and other added value products, not the basic food stuff, two completely different markets.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that there is going to be a fragmentation of markets in terms of the role of the potato or the utilization of the potato or land use?
I think it's there already, depending on which part of the globe you're producing potatoes.
What was your comment too in the same?
Well, it deals with the payment of the use of externalities in the environment, impact of insecticides, externalities expressed in human health. There's a whole range of these for which there's only weak payment at this time, and I think the pressure will come that more full payment for these externalities should be reflected in the market of potato, which is a burden to the producer.
I agree. I think, again, we spoke about it in the session before lunch. I think headwinds are going to come, be it the price of fuel, be it the cost of government regulation, be it the amount of chemicals that you can no longer use, be it the type of storage that you have to employ to sort of keep your potatoes in good enough condition to the end of the season. So I think all of those things are absolutely going to come. But I think as growers and as a sector, and this is one of the things I think what you say worries me, is technology is the only thing that can win that battle, be it potato varieties, growing them in, better ways. That's what, if we don't have we know the headwinds are going to come, but we have to make sure that we can innovate and use technology and latest thinking to tackle those. And that's where all of the, the farmers, the buying community, the consumers, all the rest of it have to come together and make the whole network sustainable. Because ultimately, it's not about you cutting into your margin or me having to cut into my margin. We have to work doubly hard to continue to keep the potato affordable and its place as a as a preferred product for the consumer to take.
So is that a value chain analysis then? Because it's not, if you look at the retail at one extreme, in developed markets, you've got, return per kilogram of product on the shelf, and then at the other extreme, you've got a farmer who's probably struggling to work out how he's actually going to reinvest in his equipment and machinery in order to sustain that operation within his rotation, within the legislative format that he's in the country he's growing, etc., etc. So is there somewhere along the line of value chain analysis that needs to happen? Is there more integration that needs to happen?
I think so, but I also think there may be some tough decisions to come, because you will know better than I do, is managing potatoes as a lot of averages is never the right way of doing it. Is if I look at all of the potatoes grown in France, you'll see pockets of 60 tonnes per hectare, and you'll see pockets of 38 tonnes per hectare. And to be honest, I think the reality of the situation will be is that certain growers will say, I am no longer going to grow potatoes, and we're going to have to fight for the right growers who have invested and can take the whole supply chain to a different level. No longer can we working on an average of 42 tonnes a hectare, which has that huge range. I think we're going to have to further specialise, or be a new raft of growers, or be even more specialists on even better land to actually make to make the economics work. Well, it will if it starts to make the potato unaffordable. Because ultimately, that's what will happen. My view is that through all of the innovations, we can keep the potato affordable. But you have to keep the potato affordable, because otherwise it's an absolute certainty less people will eat potatoes. They'll eat rice or pasta, or go and eat their muffins or something else. That's what consumers do. In my that's my view.
Chantell, I'd throw out a couple other issues here that are somewhat related to what David's talking about, back to the consumer. And it depends if we have a return to a high growth scenario where people have more money to spend. And that's this locavore and organic movements, where people wanting to buy food that's been grown 100 miles from their house, or it has not been touched by anything that's been artificially fertilized, insecticide, and so forth. There's segments. Some folks believe that that's going to be just a short-term trend, not going to expand. But the more we fight you have to buy food from within 100 miles of your house, the more difficult it is to feed the world, because that's just not the economic efficient way to grow food. But I know that you're facing that in Europe. We're facing that in the States. This locavore movement it does have some wheels to it, and it's continuing to grow.
Can I say, in terms of certainty, there will be a tension between food security and the trends trends towards health and local and.
You got part of the world who just need food. And potatoes can play a very good role in terms of economic providing of healthy calories. And you got the other people who want to pay premium for organic.
Yeah, and that will further segment the market in terms of the niche and the specialization and Okay, yeah.
Perhaps certainty, I think, is also that there will be higher demand for convenient food in the rest of the world only, not only in Europe and North America, but everywhere. There will be a growth for demand for convenient food, and there will be more visits to food service.
Kind of the expansion of the Western cuisine worldwide.
And sorry, an expansion beyond Western cuisine?
Most like we see in China.
Western cuisine.
Western cuisine.
McDonald's.
Yes. I mean, like in China, where
Is that Western cuisine?
KFCs have taken on a whole different imagery than they have in the States. There's more KFCs than there are McDonald's in China.
Yeah.
And expanding rapidly.
Yeah.
But it also, it just creates a whole different imagery of what the future will be in terms of what people are eating. Like there's a Starbucks in every corner. Right next to the Beijing, the Great Wall in China, there's a Starbucks. We need French fries next to every Great Wall as well.
Yeah. Okay, can I leave it there in terms of those are some of the certainties? We've got a list of uncertainties, and out of the uncertainties, we want to get what those two axes are that will develop the scenarios for the potato industry. So if I can just very quickly come back and say, well, what have we put here? Volatility of markets. I'm just going to quickly read them because what we want to do is sort of cluster to say what do we think out of that list are the two key drivers. Volatility of markets, trade agreements across the world, legislation in the growing space, global weather, the role of GM, the supply of free varieties, the emergence of new pests or disease, and perhaps some of them link in terms of weather and, you know, there's a connection there. Potato seen as a healthy vegetable. World oil prices, willingness to invest in HR, we're talking skills and the availability of skills across the supply chain, and the change of land use, and those will be regulatory drivers and where that's going to go. And in that, we've said those are the certainties that there are going to be shifts, there are going to be change, there is a focus on health, it will be about affordability, there's a shift towards value. So out of those, panel to start with, would you have two axes that you would put at that would develop? So as in the global scenarios, the one world, divided world, and we looked at the economy, what are the two key drivers for the potato industry into the future?
Well, I feel it is the united world which is going to have an impact, and the reason is that, you know, there are certain segments of the globe where technology availability in terms of the new areas where you are going to have diversification is not currently available. You know, if it is, say for example, it could be processing segment, it could be storage segment. As of now, storage segment, say for example, in subtropical world is, you know, it's different. So we need different kind of storage, technology to, you know, commensurate with the kind of availability that is required for supply of raw material to the industry. Mechanization is another part because you see, of course, there has to be some adjustment in mechanization because the farmland availability in third world is definitely smaller as compared to the, you know, Europe and America. But still, the kind of technologies which are available there, they need to be adapted and developed and passed on to the potato growers. So if it is a united world, naturally, I feel, you know, the requirement of the third world can be met out from the developed world, and naturally that would initiate and trigger, you know, the growth in industry. This is my feeling.
Okay.
Chantell, I'm going to take a stab because you're suggesting, or you're asking us if we were going to put our own quadrants.
Yes.
If we were looking from a consumer standpoint, which I agree with what was said earlier, is that you need to look at any product from a consumer's standpoint long term. It's how the consumer is going to view the potato from a nutritious viewpoint. One scale being that they see it as it creates obesity. The other extreme being it helps them be healthy, to live a healthy lifestyle. And the degree that the consumer, where it sees the potato on that scale from being bad for me to being really good for me, has a big impact on how the potato is seen in the future. And I do start with the potato as the core, even though we're talking crisps, French fries, whatever you might want, the other scenarios. Because if the consumer doesn't see potatoes as healthy to begin with, it doesn't matter what the imagery of the other processed potato products are.
So it's to a consumer behavior, and I've just put the one axis, potato healthy, potato unhealthy.
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be one I'd throw out.
Okay. And then the other one?
I would see probably value.
value.
Again, I was looking at it from a consumer standpoint, I'd say it's really good value for my dollar or my pound or whatever it might be, my euro, versus not a good value. And depending on how I see, because I think no matter what scenario we look at quadrant, value plays a role.
But can I interrupt? I'm afraid that we're about to run out of time. So this has obviously been a very thought-provoking exercise that we've done, and we could carry on for forever and ever, I'm sure. So I would like to thank the panel for their contribution. I'd also like to thank Chantell for bringing it all together, and also the audience, yourselves, for contributing as well. So we'll take the thoughts away with us, and we can consider them going forward. But thank you all very much anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.